Welcome everyone. I am KJ Burrington. As Jenny introduced me, I'm from the Wisconsin Center for Dairy Research, and I will be speaking to you today about developing specialty yogurts. To give you a little bit more background about our center, it has been here for over 30 years. We are a part of the University of Wisconsin, and we are also in the same building as the Food Science Department. So much of the work that we do here is long-term research. So working with graduate students that are focused on dairy-based research topics. But we also do a lot of work for food companies and dairy companies. In my role, I work a lot with the manufacturers of dairy ingredients and help them characterize their ingredients and help them understand their performance attributes, maybe what they're good at doing and maybe what they're not so good at doing, and also help them to talk about those ingredients when they speak to end user companies. So companies that are going to develop new products with those ingredients. And because dairy ingredients are used in just about every food application, we do work on a very wide variety of products from confections to bakery products to nutrition bars, but also our specialty is probably more focused on beverages and on yogurts. So I'm very happy to talk with you today about how maybe we can think about developing some new yogurts or some specialty yogurts. The topics I'm going to cover are more related to some of the trends that we're seeing here in the United States. I imagine that you are probably seeing similar trends in Australia. I did have the good fortune to be there a few years ago to do some yogurt training for DIAA, and I discovered that one of the favorite yogurts in Australia is passion fruit flavor, which is not a very common flavor here, and it's actually a really nice flavor. I was very pleased to find several different passion fruit yogurts there. In fact, we spent a lot of time in understanding how to taste yogurt, how to grade yogurt, and we used passion fruit as our example there. In the United States, we have collegiate programs that also train their students to learn how to judge dairy products, and they always use strawberry yogurt, which is not as interesting at all to me. Um, so passion fruit is now one of my favorite flavors. So getting back to our topic, I'm going to try to cover clean label because that's a very strong trend here, which typically means fewer ingredients and of course ingredients that are easy to understand. Um, I'm sure you're seeing that as well in your markets. I will talk a little bit about less sugar and no added sugar products. In the United States, in our ingredient labels, companies are now required to list the amount of added sugar in their products, and that is focusing much more attention on sugar for consumers. I think sugar has kind of become sort of the evil ingredient as far as consumers are concerned. So many consumers are trying to avoid that. We'll talk a little bit about some new drinkable products and also some new flavors. So we're seeing some botanical flavors starting to emerge in our products, and of course, also more indulgent flavors. We'll talk a little bit about artisanal products, just like we find in the cheese area in our country. We have some very small companies that are trying to develop very unique and very artisanal type yogurts. And then I'll also talk about some international products because we do have some companies in the US that try to model their product maybe after a product that comes from a different country. To start with clean label products, high protein yogurts here were probably some of the first clean label products. And that primarily is because it was easier for them. If you think about a high protein yogurt, whether it's a Greek style or a skyr or some other kind of a product, it has a lot more dairy protein in it. And because of that, that brings a lot more stability to the product. So many of them are concentrated yogurts, of course, where they have gone through, the yogurt has gone through a concentration process. Some of them use a milk protein concentrate or maybe a whey protein concentrate to increase their protein content. And overall, those products have less dependence on starches or hydrocolloids to provide texture stability. So that in and itself makes them have fewer ingredients and also a cleaner label. So just in review, and many of you are making products in this category probably, so you're pretty familiar with it. But if you are going to make a high protein yogurt, no matter if you want to call it a Greek style or a skyr or some other high protein yogurt, there's different ways to do that. And probably the most traditional method would be a separation using a cork type separator. And in this case, you're removing water and lactose and some minerals, which becomes your acid whey while you're concentrating the protein in the yogurt itself. You can also do that by membrane separation. In this case, ultrafiltration of the yogurt. So this product here, which is an Icelandic yogurt called Smari, uses membrane separation to concentrate the yogurt and achieve a higher protein level. This process, of course, even though you're using a membrane, still produces an acid whey product. So there's a couple other ways to do this. You could also take milk that is ultrafiltered and achieve your target protein by that means, and then make your yogurt out of your ultrafiltered milk. So this particular product here by Yoplait makes their yogurt with ultrafiltered milk. And the advantage that you have in this case is that it produces a product that is high protein, but it doesn't have any acid whey development because all of that is, of course, went out with the milk permeate, or a lot of it went with the milk permeate, and you started off with more protein to begin with. So the disadvantage of that is that you have a product that does take longer to ferment, because if you start with more protein in your yogurt mix, it takes longer for the bacteria to produce acid and enough acid to sort of surpass the buffering capacity of that protein and to drop the pH low enough for the target that you're trying to reach, which in most cases is about pH 4.6. The other advantage of that is that you don't have any hydration of powders. You're starting from a fluid milk, and you don't have to worry about any sort of powder addition or hydration of the powder. The last method would be addition of milk protein concentrate or whey protein concentrate to reach the target protein. So this, of course, also creates a mix that has more protein in it. It also gives you the other, not issue, but something to be aware of in terms of the hydration of the powders needed. But you won't produce any acid whey in this case either, and that for some companies is a real advantage. But this also will take longer to ferment. So just like the ultrafiltered milk, you're going to have a longer fermentation time. Okay. So the three yogurts that I have here on the screen are all 10% protein yogurts, and they've achieved them through different methods. So as I said, the one on the left is the ultrafiltered milk product made by Yoplait. The middle product is called Odyssey Greek yogurt, and this is made by fortification with the addition of milk protein concentrate. And then the one on the right is made by Cabot Creamery, which is actually in Vermont. The Odyssey product is made here in Wisconsin. And the Cabot product uses a combination of MPC and or milk protein concentrate and whey protein concentrate. So the textures of these are all a little different. And I'm going to show you in a minute what kind of a product you're going to end up making in terms of viscosity. So there are some advantages of using whey or milk protein. Both of them have advantages and both of them have disadvantages. So the advantages of using whey protein is typically the hydration time for the ingredient is much faster, it's shorter. Whey protein has been very good at preventing syneresis, so it does a nice job of stabilization. You will get some increase in firmness and viscosity, but not a lot, and you'll have a shorter gelation time. With milk protein, you actually will probably have a little cleaner taste. You'll have and a cleaner flavor. The color is more white, very white like yogurt, and the gel is very firm, but sometimes it can be too firm. So some of the disadvantages for using whey protein is whey protein tends to be tan in color. So if you're using it, a lot of it in a yogurt, say you're using 6, 7, 8, or 8% of it, it will provide a color to the yogurt, which is not going to be characteristic for yogurt. Typically, we expect a very white color. Whey protein can also have more whey flavor, which can come through in the yogurt. And your texture could get grainy and weak if you add too much of it. And that's mainly because the whey protein is much more heat sensitive, and it can actually denature too much and create this grainy texture. Milk protein, on the other hand, takes more time to hydrate, and if it isn't hydrated sufficiently, it will actually produce kind of a grainy texture. And if you add a lot of it, so if you're getting that 8, 9, 10% protein range, it can be very firm and maybe too firm in texture as far as what your target texture is or what your preference is. So here, just to show you some comparisons, I have different viscosity measurements for yogurts that are made with whey protein concentrate and yogurts that are made with all milk protein concentrate. And I have 3 different levels of protein here. So 6% protein, 8% protein, and 10% protein. Now, all of these were heat treated at a fairly low temperature, so 68 centigrade for about 30 minutes. And part of the reason is because if you're going to use a lot of whey protein, you actually would have a very difficult time in getting the heat stability out of that whey protein at higher temperatures. So to keep the texture nice and smooth and prevent graininess, these products with whey protein have to be pasteurized at lower temperatures. So just to give you a comparison, if you see that viscosities are much different here. If you make a product with whey protein concentrate, which is in the blue, it is much lower in viscosity at 6% protein, at 8% protein, and especially at 10% protein compared to the milk protein concentrate. And a lot of that has to do with, if you think about it, milk protein concentrate is mostly casein, right? So you have 80% casein, 20% whey protein. The body and texture of your yogurt is really driven by the casein gel that forms through the fermentation process. So when you interrupt that ratio, and let's see if I can do this. You have a 42% casein to 58% whey protein ratio. If you go up to 8% protein, you've changed that ratio from 31 to 69% whey protein. Now remember, these are going to be 80% casein and 20% whey protein, or your products that have MPC added to them. This one is very much reduced in viscosity, but if you look at the ratio of casein to whey protein, it's almost reversed. So we know that whey protein is very soluble, right? It and doesn't isn't going to form that firm gel because they're the proteins that stay soluble through that acidification process. So just something to be aware of if you're trying to really add a lot of whey protein to a yogurt is that you can change the viscosity a lot, but you can also work that to your advantage. So if you think of trying to make a um, drinkable yogurt that has 10% protein, if you try to do it with an MPC, this product is not going to be drinkable, whereas this one will be drinkable. So you can play with both of these ingredients really to your advantage. Get out of this here. There we go. So I have some yogurts here from different countries, and these are all yogurts that use whey protein concentrate. Now, most, in fact, all of these, I think, are using whey protein concentrate at lower levels. So it's not necessarily a high protein product, but they're using it as a functional ingredient, and they're using it to provide texture and stability for their yogurt. And it also makes it an ingredient that, again, is a little nicer to see on a label as compared to maybe a modified starch or maybe another type of or a type of hydrocolloid. Here are some products from different countries that are made with milk protein concentrate. And these are, some of these are high protein, some of them are not. And similar reasons. So if you're making, in this case, this is a Greek style from Thailand, and this is going to be more of a traditional spoonable yogurt. This actually is a drink. And of course, these other three, the one from Turkey and Chile and Mexico, are more traditional yogurts where they're just using the milk protein concentrate to provide more texture, maybe more firmness, and some stability. So if we get into drinkables especially will have more stability issues because typically they have a lower solids content. So this is something that we need to be careful of. And these will often have stabilizers, maybe pectin, maybe guar gum, gelatin, starch, maybe even some sodium CMC. And oftentimes these could be improved in terms of their stability just by some addition of a whey protein concentrate. And that would contribute some protein, but also contribute some stability and be a little bit more clean label. So here are some different drinkable yogurts that do use whey protein concentrate from different countries. So it's not an uncommon thing to do. And I often show these here as well in the United States because sometimes I think, people that work on yogurt in the United States think, well, we must be the only ones using these ingredients, but it's not true. So you can find yogurts all over the world that use different dairy ingredients. So let's talk a little bit about less sugar and no added sugar. As I said, in the last several years here, we've seen a pretty strong growth, in this case 68% share growth in low sugar and about almost a 35% share growth in no added sugar claims for yogurts. And as I did say, that high protein yogurts were some of the first ones that we've seen here to decrease sugar. And it would make sense because if you think about the consumers that buy high protein yogurts, they're probably already thinking about the nutritional content of their food, and they're probably going to be less likely to buy a high protein yogurt that also has a high sugar content. So we are seeing a lot more of those, and I'm going to show you some examples of those. Some of these products have very low sugar, and they also have low sweetness because they haven't tried to add additional sweeteners. Um, some of them will use high potency sweeteners, but many of them don't. So I think they're trying to get some of these high protein yogurt consumers used to a lot less sweetness. And some people are like that. I know I'm a person that typically buys a lot of plain high protein yogurt, and I might add my own fruit to it or granola to it. And I typically don't buy a lot of the flavored ones because I want to create my own um, sweetness levels and my own add-ins. And the other thing we're going to talk about is also to consider lactose hydrolysis as a part of your process of creating sweetness and maybe helping with that, less sugar or no added sugar claim. So here's a product that has a no added sugar claim. And these, Faye came out with a number of these in the last year. And the product still has 13 grams of protein, but it only has 6 grams of sugar. So that is very low. We have products here that you might find that for a 150 gram cup maybe has close to 30 grams of sugar. So that is a very low number. They don't use any added sweeteners, and they talk about that on the website and in some of the consumer messaging that they don't use added sweeteners. The products themselves, they have a few different flavors here, and these are the ones that have the mix-ins. So there's a chocolate and coconut and a chocolate and hazelnut. So still kind of indulgent by using some of these ingredients, but pretty nice products in general. So here's another one, and this of course is Danone's product that is called Wallaby here. This is our Aussie Greek yogurt, and they have very big bright letters here, no added sugar, or no sugar added. So this product has 11 grams of protein, 5 grams of fat, 5 grams of sugar. Traditionally here, and you'll see another Aussie type of a brand after this, and lots of people have asked me, so what makes it an Aussie yogurt? And maybe some of you could answer that. But the first products that we saw that really were different from our products were mainly they were made with whole milk. So they were probably some of the first products that we would have considered a full fat product. And that's what made them so nice and creamy. And if I had to say what is the one thing that maybe makes these different, I would have said it's because they were made with whole milk. Now we have a lot of other products on the market that are full fat. So it's a nice trend that I'm seeing. Also helps to contribute to clean label because fat, of course, creates lots of nice texture and creaminess that you don't have to create with other ingredients. This particular product is sweetened by fruit, so they don't use added sweeteners. And they have some interesting flavors here. So there's a peach hibiscus. So remember I mentioned the botanical flavors. That's kind of a new trend across a lot of products in the US in the last year or so, and will continue to be. So you have a peach hibiscus and you have a strawberry rose. So we're going to see more of that, not just in cultured products, but as in other products too, especially like beverages. So here's the Noosa product. So this is the high protein, low sugar, they call it high-low. That is a 12 grams of protein and 12 grams of sugar. So a little bit more moderate level, not quite so low. And this product is sweetened with wildflower honey, which is kind of a nice ingredient for a label. And I think consumers would probably like that quite well. This is a yogurt for kids. So Siggy's is considered an Icelandic brand here, and it's been around for quite a long time. This particular product has 50% less sugar and 30% fewer ingredients compared to other kids' yogurts. So the pouch itself is 99 grams, and it has 5 grams of protein and 6 grams of sugar. So typically, Siggy's also does not use any high potency sweeteners, and the products are, I would say, relatively low in sweetness. So for some kids, they might not be sweet enough, but again, it's one of those things that I think everybody gets used to a certain level of sweetness, and typically, Siggy's makes a very nice yogurt. Let's talk about lactose hydrolysis a little bit. This is, of course, technology that has been available for, boy, probably 40 or 50 years, I would say, to the dairy industry. And it is a very easy way to increase sweetness by just using the naturally occurring sugar in white mass. Of course, you use lactase. And the beauty of this enzyme is that you can add it at the same time as the cultures, and it will work during the normal incubation time, which is typically going to be 4 to 6 hours at 43 C. Now, the levels of addition are pretty low, so typically they're going to be less than 0.1%. Lactase does add cost, and I think that has been one of the issues for people maybe not wanting to use it because of the added cost. In our regulation environment, lactose-free definition is actually less than 0.1%. And I know in the UK it's less than 0.01%. I'm actually not sure about Australia. I'm sure you are well aware of what the lactose-free requirements are there. But typically, in order to make sure that your hydrolysis is complete here we have the capability of doing HPLC to make sure that we have reached those low levels. You could also send it out to another lab to make sure that your incubation time has been sufficient enough to finish up the hydrolysis. Of course, you're going to have more shelf life also with the yogurt, so it could continue. But ideally, you'd want to make sure that it was really lactose free by the time you got to the consumer. One of the things I wanted to show you, and this has really been a really nice piece of equipment for us to use, and this has not been available that long, but it's called the LactoSense Rapid Lactose Measurement, and it's sold by Christian Hansen, who of course also sells cultures and lactase enzyme and other things, and it's such a nice way to quickly get a lactose measurement. So this product, and I don't want to make it sound too much like a sales pitch, but it's so much easier because typically, so the equipment has been standardized by HPLC, and it's a very quick method where there's a very quick preparation of the sample, and you deposit it on this, let me get my little annotator here. You deposit it on the reader here, and it actually has a mobilized enzyme on it, and liquid with a mix, and then you put your liquid with your mix of sugars on there, and only the lactose actually binds to the immobilized enzyme. So sugars like glucose and lactose don't interfere, and then the enzyme oxidizes the lactose and generates electrons that are picked up and measured by the biochip in the reader, and you get an actual measurement. So if you're trying to make sure you've really got a lactose-free product, it will give you, it'll say it's 0.1% or 0.08%, it'll give you a reading. And we have found that it is pretty accurate, and it is a really quick way of getting a feel for if your enzyme if you've added enough enzyme, because of course it's always based on time and temperature and the amount of enzyme you use. So you can really optimize, I think, and try to reach that level of enzyme that's going to be optimal for your process, and also hopefully to save you money and not so you don't use more enzyme than you need. Here's an example of a lactose-free product that's an Activia, which is a very well-known yogurt product. And you'll notice that all of the products, at least here in the US, you'll see that lactase is listed on the ingredient legend, so that hopefully consumers understand that that means the lactase is added. And usually they'll say that also somewhere on the label, that the lactase has been added to create the lactose-free product. I think I have another one here. So here's another one. So this is actually a product that's maybe a little bit, a very small creamery that has also wanted to make a lactose-free product. And again, we do have consumers here that are lactose intolerant. So if this is a product that maybe they would buy, you know, I think most of us are under the understanding that consuming yogurt is a little bit different if you are lactose intolerant, because you've got the bacteria there, and they also will help you to digest the lactose that's in the yogurt. But in this case, many companies do want to say lactose free, and I think they feel that that provides a product for consumers that are looking for lactose free products. But at the same time, especially in this blueberry product or any flavored product, I think you'll find that you can reduce maybe the added sugar to get the sweetness level that you're looking for. I actually have a couple of formulations here that we have worked on. This one was about 7 years ago now, I guess. And this was a coffee flavored drinking yogurt. And in this case, we used a lactase enzyme, so at about 0.05%. And that level was enough to, or 0.05, yeah, 0.05%. That level's enough to hydrolyze all the lactose that's in the yogurt base itself within the typical incubation time for this product. So we have a little bit of WPC80 in there, which is going to add a little bit of lactose, but overall there's not exorbitantly high levels in here. So you should be able to easily hydrolyze the lactose content in the mix with 0.05%. And we did add some sweetener to this. We did add a little bit of stevia leaf extract to it, but you won't see any added sugar at all. Back in 2013, we weren't so focused on that, but we also decided that we would like it to be a little bit more protein focused. So this product had 10 grams of protein in 240 mils and 12 grams of sugar, which isn't too bad. This is actually a more recent formulation, and in this product you'll notice that I added both milk permeate, and we also added milk protein isolate. And this was also, we called it a hydration yogurt drink, and that was mainly because we were trying to showcase some of the minerals that are found in milk permeate. So if you look at the label, you'll see that there are 210 milligrams of sodium and 630 milligrams of potassium, which is very high. So if you think about sort of a dairy-based um, yogurt drink that also would be very hydrating, similar to other sports drinks. You added a lot of really nice electrolytes to this product. And at the same time, we also added the lactase enzyme and tried to create some sweetness with that. So you'll notice that this has no added sugar, um, which is really nice to put on a product. And we have still 23 grams of carbohydrates, but so we took advantage of that carbohydrate level, and that's really coming from the reduced fat milk and also the milk permeate. And if you're hydrolyzing all of that lactose, then you can get some nice sweetness out of it. But just another opportunity to use lactase to create some sweetness. And also to use milk permeate, which I know you have some there in Australia. Let's look at a few drinking yogurts here. And this is a pretty new one in the last 6 months or so. And it's interesting because it's a caffeinated and cultured dairy drink. They don't call it a drinkable yogurt, it's a cultured dairy drink. And I'm thinking they did that because of the added caffeine. So it has 25 grams of protein. They used whey protein concentrate. So remember I talked about whey protein concentrate creates a lot less viscosity. So if you're going to make a drinking yogurt that's fortified, and that's a pretty high level of protein, in this case it was probably about 300 milliliters. Whey protein concentrate will probably be your best choice for that kind of a product. They added caffeine with a coffee fruit extract. They do have 6 grams of added sugar, but it's only which isn't too bad, and it's a total of 19 grams of sugar in the whole product. This is a smoothie product that is kind of a Greek yogurt type of a smoothie that's relatively new. Lighthouse Foods is actually not known for making smoothies. They make salad dressings, a lot of them in this country, and they must have decided to get into smoothies. So these you would find actually in the produce case. You won't find them in a typical dairy case. But these are about 13 grams of protein. They're not that low in sugar though, but they're just another way to showcase, I guess, Greek yogurt. And these do have some milk protein concentrate in it, but they also do tend to have they have some other hydrocolloids and starch and gelatin and things in there. So not necessarily clean label, but just a newer product for this market. This is another drinkable, not necessarily really high in protein, but 6 grams of protein, 14% daily value of fiber. So we're seeing some products now that are adding fiber a little bit more commonly, and especially if they're adding some probiotic organisms to that, the fiber is a good thing to add. This particular product has a calcium level that's similar to a glass of milk. And the reason I think I pulled these is that actually I was really interested in the flavors. So guanabana is not a really common flavor here for the US. Either is pina colada, and then this last one, pecan cereal, was really interesting. We don't have very many products that use pecans in this country. Almonds, of course, are much more common, but not pecans. And cereal are in some products, maybe not as much in drinkable products, but we are seeing grains and things added to yogurts. This is a kefir, and this kefir is a Lifeway product, which is a very big brand in the United States. This happens to be a kefir mini, and this is a shot style probiotic kefir. But what I thought was really interesting about it was some of the flavors. So they have the campfire s'mores, and they had a unicorn cake, which are very different flavors for cultured products, especially. This last one is actually one that we worked on some years ago. We called it a Mediterranean yogurt drink. Um, it actually is very similar to products that you'll find in the Middle East, and even lassi products that would typically add salt, perhaps, because you're making a yogurt for people that live in a very hot climate. And some of these yogurts, I think in Iran it would be called doog. A lot of these products were designed to also help replenish fluids and provide sodium and other electrolytes. So oftentimes they had added salt. And some of these products have maybe 600 milligrams of sodium in them, which is quite high. That's more like a cup of soup. So we decided that we would try to develop something with milk permeate, which also has a saltiness to it. And that salty character brings along with it a lot of potassium and a lot of sodium. So you'll also notice that the flavors are rather unique. So this has a cucumber puree in it, and it also has a lemon flavor. And it actually was very refreshing, and maybe not typical for a US yogurt at all. I know that, and we showed it also at our Institute of Food Technologists meeting. I think it was maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And many of the attendees that came to the booth, especially from the Middle East, really liked it, and they thought, "Oh, this is very similar to something that I grew up with when I was a kid." But all the Americans thought it tasted like cucumber salad, so it didn't go over very well with them. But I still think it could work here. It might be the right time. So I have a few examples of some indulgent flavors. Here's one for kids. Of course, everybody knows about Starburst candy, and what better way to sell yogurt is to put a picture of a piece of candy on it. These aren't exorbitantly high in sugar, 22 grams of sugar, so definitely higher than some of our products that are focused on less sugar. But 6 grams of protein, very kid focused though. This is a dessert-like product. This is actually from Switzerland, made by Emmy, and this product has 8 grams of protein, but a really nice level of fat, 11 grams in it, so very indulgent, very creamy. And what I thought sounded really good too were some of the flavors. So there's a lemon yogurt with cake pieces, and a strawberry yogurt with strawberry pieces, but I guess most of our strawberry yogurts, we do usually try to have some sort of fruit identity as well, but they sound really good. This is another indulgent product. So this is a sorbet style yogurt. This is actually made by Arla in Finland, and the word ihana means wonderful. This is a lactose-free product. So they took the time to hydrolyze the lactose, and these flavors also sounded really interesting to me. So a black currant and lemon pie, and papaya and lime. And I guess the whole sorbet concept is really different for yogurt. I have a couple of artisan yogurts here, and I guess there's not a real definition of what an artisan yogurt is, but in many cases you have a dairy that maybe gets their milk from only one family farm, and in this case this is a Chicago-based company called Grow Good Foods, and they get their milk from a single family dairy in the Midwest. It's not homogenized, and it's not particularly high in protein, but it's pretty low in sugar. And they've tried to add nothing artificial, no preservatives, no additives, no thickeners, or any fillers. So very clean label focused. This is a product that's actually an artisan Greek style yogurt, and this is from New York. And the really unique thing about this is they say 97% lactose free, which is kind of funny. But I think they strain their products, so that would be possible. I thought what was really interesting was that they're put in these reusable terracotta pots, and you have flavors like mission fig and toasted coconut, big cherry, and apricot. Now I have a few, as I said, international yogurts. So this is actually a yogurt that's made here in Madison, and it happened to be a product that we helped this person develop, and he calls it Swiss yogurt from Wisconsin. So he grew up and had his summers in Switzerland with his grandparents and got used to the yogurt there. And what he tried to do was duplicate what that yogurt represents. So I would say the cultures that he uses are maybe more tart than what we're typically used to here. He uses only brown Swiss milk, and we have a farm that he buys from that's probably 30 miles away, and he's done really well in terms of contests and things like that. But the texture is very thin because he doesn't add any additives, not even any milk powders or anything to it. This is a Bulgarian yogurt. You'll see the flavor is rose, and this product is by Balkan Treasure. And the Bulgarian yogurt is kind of interesting because they, of course, have the history of yogurt making, and this doctor, Saman Grigorov, discovered actually Lactobacillus delbrueckii, the subspecies Bulgaricus. So they feel like they have a special claim to yogurt because of that. And they typically refer to yogurt as sour milk. This product uses Bulgarian cultures, and it also uses Jersey cow milk. And you'll see on there that it's also traditionally pot set, and it has no sugar added. This one you've probably heard of. So again, we've got some small companies and some big companies. And here's your French style yogurt, Oui by Yoplait. So this is 8 or fewer ingredients, very custard-like, also pot set, which we would just call cup set. Very nice and creamy, and not very tart at all. This is actually a Argentinian product. This is Danone's product, La Serenissima, and this I thought was interesting also maybe because of the flavors. So this is also, I think it's a cup set, and they tried to make it or model it after their original yogurt that was produced in 1963, so many years ago. Here's a lemon and ginger flavor and a sweet squash flavor, which I thought sounded really interesting. This one is an Italian style yogurt, and this is actually from the UK, but what I thought was really interesting about this was that it's called a mascarpone style. So if you've ever had mascarpone, it's typically used to make a lot of Italian desserts. And it's a very creamy, high-fat kind of a product. So it's interesting that they tried to make a yogurt that was a mascarpone style. And that actually concludes my presentation for today. So I would like to thank you all for attending, especially thank Dairy Australia, and I would be happy to take some questions at this time.
That's great, thanks so much. So we've got a few questions popping up there when you open your chat box.
Yep. Okay.
So just while you're looking there, I'll just read out what Patrick wrote. In Australia, lactose-free means that no detectable lactose should be detected, but the regulations do not specify a test method. So as detection methods improve, it creates an impossible goal for Australian manufacturers. We need to change the regulations. So that just gives you a picture there, KJ, of
Right,
what's
right.
going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually there are limitations even for HPLC in terms of detectable levels. So you're correct that the regulations do need to allow for that. So that's actually not a good thing. Maybe your regulations are a little bit more like the UK, but I guess it does depend on the method that you want to use. So fortunately, we are able to have 0.1%, less than 0.1%, and that seems to work for the UK. But maybe you could, I don't know, you do. It does sound like you have to work with your regulators a bit. Let's see. Okay. So here's another question. You mentioned at the start, hydration of MPC can be challenging. What parameters are best to fully hydrate MPC in terms of time and temperature? So what I would recommend for that, and I'm thinking that most dairies have a typical tri-blender or liquefier type of hydration system. For MPC 70 above, we typically recommend a temperature of 50 C, and it should take less than an hour at 50 C. So the products that you're buying, I'm thinking that Australia has been making MPC for quite some time, so they should be pretty good at it. And I would say 50 C for maybe even 30 minutes should be enough. But you'll know that doesn't necessarily mean with constant mixing. So I would say you can always start with the fast mixing or high shear, and then once the product is in solution, you don't have to mix it at high shear. In fact, I wouldn't, because it would foam. But with slow agitation is probably best.
There's another question about that also that I wrote in.
Can we hydrate cold otherwise with a high shear mixer? You can. It just will take longer at cold temperatures. So we have seen products here that after several hours, they're still not hydrated. And that means then that you won't get very good performance out of them. So once you put them through the heat treatment and then try to make yogurt out of them, they will actually produce somewhat grainy yogurt, especially if you're trying to add higher levels. So if you're only adding 1 or 2%, then you could probably get by with a shorter amount of time at cold temperatures, so maybe an hour or two. But if you're trying to make a 10% protein yogurt with added MPC, boy, we've seen it take like 10 hours for that product to be fully hydrated. So cold isn't always better. We actually have manufacturers here that will hydrate cold for 24 hours, and then they'll make their yogurt. And they make a very nice yogurt, but that's a long time. So here's another question. You mentioned making yogurt by ultrafiltration takes longer in fermentation time. How much longer compared to traditional quark? So I would say the typical ultra-filtered yogurt. So if you're going to have a product that has, we'll say 10% protein, so you ultra-filtered the milk enough to achieve 10% protein, those will take easily 8 to 10 hours to ferment. So from a traditional quark, you're going through a very typical fermentation time before you actually put it through a separator. So you're going to jump maybe from 4 to 6 hours all the way up to 8 to 10. So
Okay.
hopefully that answers that.
I put in a couple of questions earlier. One of them,
Yeah,
can you tell us the strongest current trends in the US, please?
sure. So for yogurt, I would say it's definitely sugar is the big focus. Um, Everybody that has a traditional product line out there, whether it be high protein and even some of the lower protein traditional products now are coming out with lower sugar versions. Um, so it's probably a good thing. I think that we've gone through lots of years of yogurts here with very high sugar content, I think, to get consumers used to consuming yogurt. But I'm not so sure that you could really call them very healthy because of the high sugar content. So, you know, I think consumers have plenty of other places they can get sugar in their diet, and yogurt probably should be one of those places where you don't have a lot of added sugar anyway.
Okay, do you think Greek yogurt will still remain as popular as it has been?
I do. I think the protein trends are still very strong. Um, we are seeing here, though, a lot of our traditional dairy companies that are now making um, non-dairy products. So I'm sure you're seeing that as well there.
Mm.
So probably the biggest pop-up, I don't know if it's maybe the strongest trend, but it is a very strong trend that all the dairy companies now are making non-dairy culture products. And they have focused a lot of their development time on those products. So the consumers have even more choice, right? Um, and of course, I am always going to be a dairy promoter um, because I work, we get our funding from the dairy farmers in the United States. Um, so I guess for the consumers that weren't eating yogurt anyway, that's a nice alternative for them. From a nutritional standpoint, I don't think they really can compare because of the protein quality of dairy. But you know, we're all about choice in the consumer world now. So if the consumers are the ones that will tell us if they want them and they want them to stick around.
Okay, so our time's getting close. We've still got a couple more questions. There was another one I popped in there about, do you know of any work being done to create new cultures for fermented dairy? What
Oh,
exactly? Yeah.
yeah. So one of the other ways to kind of create, of course, more texture and also to contribute to clean label is to try to get a little bit more functionality out of your culture. So all of the culture houses have been, focusing on not only can I create maybe more texture through exopolysaccharide production that will help with overall stability of your products. Um, the other thing they're also creating, which has been very helpful for clean label, are these cultures that help with shelf life. So they're helping to prevent yeast and mold growth and helping companies get a little more shelf life out of a product without adding maybe potassium sorbate or sodium citrate or something like that. So I would definitely take advantages of those types of cultures.
Very good. Okay, and the final question was, is the market in America seeing as much of an increase in plant-based products, which is what you just answered as part of the other question?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
We are seeing um, a lot of that growth, and I will say this is I haven't seen the actual numbers, but because you have so many more product developers now and resources being put into plant-based, that means there are not as many resources to develop new dairy-based products. So I think we're going to see a little bit of a slowdown in some of our new product introductions on the dairy side because of that.
Okay, look, just to add to that, we do have a webinar coming up in May, and it's a man, I forget his name, but he's presenting on a study that's been done here in Australia, talking about the sustainability costs of dairy as compared with plant-based products. And I think that'll be a really important webinar for all dairy people to see,
Yeah,
because yeah, anyway, it's going to be very, very interesting. He'll be releasing that study, and no doubt it'll get a bit of media at the time. But a lot of people who eat plant-based think that they do it because it's more sustainable and as part of the reason. Yeah. Um, and also, I also want to make you aware, and I'll type this in, but Gianna's Cornwall is releasing a book called Homemade Yogurt and Kefir. But for people who are involved in developing new products, you might get some ideas from her book for developing new products, because I know she's searched worldwide for different ideas to pop into this book. So do you have anything else there to finish off with, KJ?
no, I think that's good for me. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it and learned something.
Yeah. And one other thing, we do have a couple of older webinars, which KJ has done previously, one on clean label yogurt, and we have another one which was done by Christian Hansen about the benefits of the various cultures for the human body. And I have got those recordings. They're being uploaded very soon to the Dairy Australia website on the resource library. But if you really want to watch them, let me know and I'll try and get them to you. So I'm just quickly typing in this this information from Gianna, so won't be a second. This is the name of Gianna's book, and I can see on Booktopia you can pre-order it. It's to be released in April. So with that, folks, thank you all so much for attending. Thank you, KJ. You had some really enlightening information there. Fantastic. And most appreciative of your efforts in putting this together for us today.